Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. I never planned to see her again. After she ran off with a man who still checked his reflection in shop windows, I folded our life into boxes and learned the art of quiet survival. Years drifted by, not quickly, not kindly, just steady as the tick of a clock. I cooked simple dinners, I ironed school uniforms. I learned how to braid my daughter's hair with fingers that shook the first time and steadied by the third. I took weekend shifts when bills pressed too hard. I watched cartoons I didn't understand because she laughed at the silly parts and leaned her head on my shoulder when the credits rolled. That was our home. Small, sometimes lonely, always honest. The day my wife left lives in a drawer in my mind I don't open anymore. A suitcase by the door, a note that called itself explanation, but read like a shopping list. Light, cold, practical. She said she needed more, and that she'd found it in someone who made her feel alive. I stood in the kitchen until the kettle screamed. The floor cooled under my feet while our daughter sat on the rug, tracing little circles with a marker. That night I made pancakes for dinner because I couldn't figure out anything else and because syrup on a plate gave a child something sweet when words don't work. My daughter is named Lily, and she is proof that love can outlast humiliation. She grew taller, sharper, kinder, carrying an old soul in young eyes. We built traditions. Sunday morning walks, late-night talks on the balcony, mugs of cocoa in winter. We didn't ban her mother's name, but we didn't invite it either. Sometimes a photo surfaced, an old vacation smile, and Lily would go quiet. She didn't ask many questions. Kids understand more than we admit. When she did, I told the truth without bitterness, and then we put the photo back and went on with our day. News of the pair trickled in through people who remember small-town history longer than they should. The lover, Evan, changed jobs twice, then 3 times. My ex posted filtered snapshots that looked bright and smelled like denial. I saw them once because a coworker showed me on a phone with a scuffed case. "You doing okay?" he asked. I nodded, because that's the answer you give when the honest one would take too long. We finalized the divorce the way you finish a chore that has to get done. Papers, signatures, appointments. I never missed support for Lily, not once. That money wasn't a duty, it was a promise. As for the woman who left, I owed her nothing beyond what the law required, and even that I delivered with clean receipts and no words. When you cut a rope that's frayed and dangerous, you don't apologize to the fibers. Time didn't carry me toward romance. It carried me toward competence. I learned how to mend hems and change oil and paint a room without streaks. I found a rhythm that didn't falter when memories tried to trip it. Part of me hardened, but another part grew gentle in new directions. I became the man I wish I'd been when I still wore a ring. Present, attentive, at peace with silence. Then Lily brought home Daniel. He shook my hand at the door while trying not to stare at the old guitar in the corner. I let him hold it, watched him strum a chord that buzzed because the action was a little high. He smiled anyway. He had respectful words, steady posture, the kind of nervous that comes from wanting to get this right. They made dinner together in our small kitchen, moving around each other like dancers who'd learned each other's steps. When they finished, we ate by the window while the city hummed below. I listened. He listened more. Some people speak loudly to hide something. He didn't. He loved her. I could see it in the way his face changed when she laughed. Seasons turned. Exams, internships, job offers, long walks with talks about future apartments that had plants on windowsills and dogs that needed names. I kept waiting for something to go wrong because I had lived too long in rooms where wrong things happened. Nothing did. They fit. On a rainy afternoon, I found a tiny velvet box in the pocket of Lily's coat while hanging it to dry. I put it back as if it were a bird egg I might crack with a breath. A week later, Daniel asked if he could take me to coffee. We sat in a shop that smelled like cinnamon and warm milk, and he asked, voice steady, if I would give him my blessing to propose. I looked down at my hands, still stained faintly with the paint from fixing the balcony rail. "Yes," I said, and the word felt like a door opening. She said yes to him on the pier where we used to feed gulls stale crackers. They planned a ceremony that felt like them, elegant, careful, full of light and little personal touches that make strangers smile. They chose a venue with soft gold ceilings and long windows that stretched dusk into something grand. I helped with lists, checked deliveries, Measured tablecloths, because Lily said the edges had to line up exactly, or it will bother me all night, Dad. I ironed napkins to keep my hands busy, and because crisp corners are a quiet kind of blessing. One night, a month before the date, she asked me if she should invite her mother. The question hung between us like a bell toll. She had not moved back to town, she hadn't attended graduations. She sent birthday messages that read like something crafted by a stranger. Lily twisted the ring on her finger and stared at the pattern on the rug. I don't want drama, she said, but I don't want regret either. I didn't answer quickly. I thought about the girl who learned to ride a bike without anyone running beside her who should have. I thought about scraped knees I bandaged and recitals I videoed with shaking hands because I didn't want to miss a note. And then I thought about a future where Lily would always wonder if she'd offered a seat at her table to someone who gave her life. It's your day, I said. Whatever brings you peace is the right choice. If you invite her, we set boundaries. If you don't, we keep the door closed without guilt. She invited her. A plain envelope with careful handwriting. I told the venue to prepare for surprises anyway. I gave the coordinator a photograph and a list of lines nobody was allowed to cross, literal and metaphorical. I practiced my toast in the mirror at midnight, edited out anything that sounded like it was written to an audience that wasn't my daughter. The speech became simple. A story of a little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest, and now fit her whole future into a glance with the man she loved. I cried while rehearsing and blamed dust. The night before the wedding, the city quieted under a mild breeze. I stayed with Lily at the venue until the planner practically pushed me out the door. Sleep, she said. You'll be crying like a faucet tomorrow. Hydrate. I went home and ironed my shirt one more time. I taped the speech to the inside of a folder like a schoolchild and laid everything out on the chair by the bed. I slept lightly, the way you do when you're listening for something joyful. Morning arrived sweet and bright. The florist turned halls into a meadow. Laughter bounced down corridors, quick and breathless. I saw my daughter in her dress for the first time and felt every year at once. She glowed, not with showmanship, but with that calm certainty that comes when a person stands right where they belong. We didn't speak for a moment. We just looked at each other, two halves of a long story that never broke. I walked her down the aisle. The music was soft. Daniel did that thing with his mouth where he tries not to cry and fails. Vows were exchanged, simple and solid. When I placed her hand in his, I didn't feel loss. I felt completion, like finishing a house and stepping back to see it standing there, beautiful, sturdy, ready for storms. The reception began with clinking glasses and hugs that smell like perfume and aftershave. I took photos with old friends, someone played a song from years before, and a group of cousins shouted the lyrics off-key. The caterers moved like a small army, trays sparkling, timing precise. I gave my toast, voice steady, in the way a bridge is steady because it has to be. People laughed at the right places and dabbed eyes with linen when the words turned tender. Lily pressed her cheek to my chest when I sat down. The day was perfect in that fragile way that makes you hold your breath. And then the doors opened, and a breeze rolled through that didn't belong to the weather. She stood there at the threshold, my former wife, dressed in a gown a shade too bright, a smile a shade too sharp. Her hair gleamed the way hair gleams when you try to make strangers forget what time has done. The room noticed because rooms notice confidence even when it's borrowed. Her eyes scanned faces until they landed on mine. She walked forward with a measured sway, the way a person walks when they have rehearsed their entrance to a mirror and loved what they saw. Guests quieted in ripples. I felt Lily stiffen beside me, then breathe through it like she had practiced. We had agreed on a plan, polite, distant, short. She reached us, set her clutch on the table as if claiming territory, and leaned close enough for me to smell a perfume I knew from another life. Years after I gave you my youth, she said, smile still painted on. You owe me for the years of marriage, or take me back to your bed. The line didn't hiss. It floated, loud enough to be heard by people who wanted to hear. It was the kind of sentence constructed for attention, not truth. I didn't flinch. I had learned a long time ago that a steady gaze unmakes performances. I let my mouth turn into something that wasn't quite a smile. You wanted more, now hold on to it, I said, quiet and clear. You won't see another penny from me. The temperature in the room changed. Conversations died from the edges inward. A violinist lowered her bow. Someone set down a champagne flute too hard and apologized to no one. My ex straightened, the corners of her grin tightening, the calculation behind her lenses flickering for the first time. She hadn't expected steel. She had expected either a scene or surrender. I gave her neither. Her confidence stuttered, then resumed as if nothing had slipped. "You always were stubborn," she said, tilting her head to let a chandelier find its way into her hair. "This is a celebration, isn't it? Don't be petty." My daughter rose, spine long, chin high. "This is my celebration," she said, not angry, simply factual. "Please keep things respectful." The woman who once tucked that child into bed with half-listening stories turned her attention to her grown daughter, as if meeting an adult in a lobby. "You look lovely," she said. "Your mother has good genes." The compliment turned sour at the end. Old habits, well worn. Daniel stood, steady at Lily's side, the picture of a man who knows which hills to defend. He didn't speak, and that silence said more than any threat. Around us, friends, relatives, co-workers drew a ring of watchfulness, ready to intervene if the air sharpened. I kept my voice even. "You were invited so our child would not carry a question into the rest of her life. You are welcome to sit, to eat cake, to clap when they dance. You are not welcome to make demands." She laughed lightly, a sound she probably practiced in front of polished glass. "Demands? I'm only reminding you of history, darling. You forget who built you." "I remember exactly who rebuilt me," I said, and glanced at Lily. Then something unexpected happened. The far doors to the kitchen swung open, and a server stepped into the light with a tray of glistening plates held level on one steady hand. He wore a black apron, a white shirt, a face I hoped I'd never see again. His eyes rose from the line of dishes to the room, registering the silence, finding its source. When his gaze met hers, the tray trembled, a plate slid and spun, landing soft as a coin. On the carpet, he looked smaller under the brightness now, like a young actor caught under a spotlight he didn't earn. Evan, the man she had chosen. The room inhaled as one. She froze, the last thin strand of practiced poise tightening until it might snap. The band stopped mid-note, whispers rustled like dry leaves, and in the hush that followed, the past walked across my daughter's wedding, carrying other people's dinners, and all three of our lives shifted by a degree that would change every mile to come. The tray wobbled again, silver clattering against porcelain. He steadied it clumsily, cheeks flushed crimson under the lights. For a second, no one moved. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. Guests leaned closer, straining to confirm what they were seeing, and then whispers spread like cracks across glass. Evan. The young man my wife had run off with. The man for whom she had torched a marriage, abandoned a child, discarded vows as though they were receipts she no longer needed. Years had passed, but here he stood, dressed in the black and white of hired help, blinking under the sharp chandelier glow. Her mask broke. I watched her painted smile falter, then fracture. She froze, torn between recognition and denial, her proud shoulders stiffening as if posture could shield her. For the first time that night, her confidence deserted her. Evan's eyes darted around the hall, searching for an exit, for anywhere to disappear, but the room was a stage, and he was the unwilling star. The tray dipped again as he stumbled. Another plate slid, striking the carpet with a muffled thud. A few guests gasped. The sound seemed to echo. Lily's hand gripped my arm, her knuckles white. She didn't say a word, but I felt the storm in her trembling fingers. Daniel stood beside her, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the man. My daughter's wedding had turned into a theater, every guest and audience to a drama no one expected. Finally, Evan spoke, his voice brittle, breaking the silence. I'll get another tray." He turned, almost fled toward the kitchen, but not before his eyes locked with hers, my ex-wife's, and in that instant the truth blazed across every face in the room. This was the man she'd chosen, the man she'd called her new beginning, the man for whom she had shattered a home. Now he was carrying plates at her daughter's wedding, the whispers swelled, murmurs crawling like vines. Guests glanced from me to her, from her to the kitchen door, putting pieces together faster than she could deny them. Her arrogance, the line she had tossed at me minutes before, "You owe me," now hung in the air, exposed for its emptiness. I didn't need to say a word. Silence itself carried the verdict. Her face drained, then flushed, then stiffened again. She straightened her shoulders and tried to smile, but it wavered like a candle in wind. "Ignore that," she said loudly. Too loudly, her voice brittle. "This is a beautiful evening. We shouldn't ruin it with old ghosts." But no one was listening anymore. The illusion had cracked. Lily rose from her seat, dignity blazing in every line of her. She didn't shout, didn't tremble. She simply looked her mother in the eye and said, calm but firm, "You've already ruined enough evenings." Her words sliced through the murmur like a bell. My chest swelled with both pride and sorrow. Pride at my daughter's strength. Sorrow at the pain that had made her grow it so early. My ex tried to recover, clapping her hands once, forced cheer painted across her lips. "Fine, I'll just take a seat. I'm still family after all." But Daniel stepped forward then, his arm protective around Lily's waist. His voice was steady, low, but carried across the room. "Family shows up when it matters. You didn't. Tonight isn't yours." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Guests looked down at their plates, uncomfortable but silently agreeing. I stood slowly, smoothing the front of my jacket. My voice was calm, measured, carrying no anger, because I didn't need anger anymore. "You had your chance," I said. "You traded it for him. That was your choice. Tonight belongs to Lily and Daniel. If you can't respect that, you should leave." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. No words came. For the first time in years, she had no script. She grabbed her clutch from the table with jerky movements, muttered something I couldn't catch, and turned toward the exit. And then, the unexpected final twist. The kitchen door opened again. Evan stepped out, no tray this time, just his apron hanging awkwardly. He looked at her, really looked, and then spoke in a voice that cracked but carried. "Don't come looking for me again. I've had enough." Gasps rippled through the hall. Her body stiffened, rigid as stone. She spun on her heel, eyes wide, and for the first time she looked small, shrunken, diminished. Then she rushed toward the door and was gone, heels clicking sharp against marble. The room exhaled. The band leader, sensing the tension, struck a chord, and music filled the silence like fresh air sweeping into a stale room. Conversations resumed in cautious trickles, then in floods. Laughter rose again, shaky at first, then stronger. The wedding reclaimed its light. Lily turned to me, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "No," I said. "Thank you. For becoming the woman you are despite everything." The rest of the night unfolded as it should have from the beginning. Toasts were made, dances spun under chandeliers, cake was cut and shared in sweet, messy slices. Daniel's mother pulled me aside and said quietly, "You've raised her well." I nodded, throat tight. Later, when the crowd thinned and the stars spilled across the sky outside, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Music drifted faint from the hall. Lily and Daniel danced together, foreheads touching, the picture of a future unshaken by the past. I thought about the years of struggle, the lonely nights, the quiet victories. I thought about the moment in the reception hall when the past had walked in uninvited and left exposed, fragile and powerless. And I realized something. Revenge hadn't been the punch I threw years ago, or the silence I wielded when I walked away. It hadn't been the refusal to pay another penny, or even the humiliation my ex suffered under the lights. Revenge was this moment, watching my daughter build a life strong enough to outshine betrayal. Revenge was peace. Revenge was joy that couldn't be stolen. I turned, walked back into the hall and joined the dance floor, letting the music carry me into a future where the past no longer had power. And when I saw Lily glance at me over Daniel's shoulder, her smile brighter than any chandelier, I knew the story was finally over.